Brett Garrett with Bain Capital Ventures. I'm a principal in the group, and today I think the topic of our conversation is big data applied to e-commerce, and in particular, entrepreneurship in that realm. And so I'd like to introduce Scott Friend, who's a managing director at Bain Capital Ventures. Prior to that, he was undergrad Brown, where he studied engineering.
Any Brown alums here? Not one? Anyone have a boyfriend who went to Brown, perhaps? Okay, cool. I knew that ahead of time.
Studied engineering there, worked at IBM, and was an HBS alum from the 90s. After HBS...
Mid to late 90s.
Mid to late, mid 90s. After that, started a company called ProfitLogic, which he'll go into detail about. And we really want to spend half our time talking about Scott's experience as an entrepreneur, as well as the trends from then to now in terms of what big data can accomplish in e-commerce and how that's evolved. And so maybe before we just jump into it, let me get a poll from folks in the audience. How many people here are interested in e-commerce broadly? Now keep your hands up if you're interested in big data within e-commerce. Keep your hands up if you're interested in entrepreneurship, if you're an entrepreneur today or want to be an entrepreneur. Keep your hands up if you heard us talk 6 months ago. Okay,
so we can say all the same stuff. Sweet. All right, so we don't have to come up with any new insights. That's good.
Okay, so we'll try to keep this pretty interactive. I'll moderate, but we'll try to pause a bunch of times to let people raise their hands and ask questions and keep it pretty lively. So maybe the first question to you, Scott, is there's a little cliche out there that says the hardest part of getting started is just the start as an entrepreneur. And can you talk a little bit about how you went from your HBS background and your study job at IBM and thought about, now I want to become an entrepreneur and start a business from square one?
Well, so let me get a feel from the room. So how many are HBS folks in the room? And how many are graduate schools, other Harvard graduate schools, and any undergrads? Got it. So no, are undergrads allowed?
Yes.
They are. Okay, they're just not here. Good. Okay, that gives me a sense. So I sat in the same shoes of many of you at HBS. I was class of 95. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had been at IBM for 6 years before that. This was 95, so a lot of people were going to start companies. The internet kind of boomed. The first one was ramping. And I knew I wanted to go do something startup-ish, but I talked to two kinds of companies that were early stage. I talked to companies where I had real passion for the product or the service, but they didn't really want me in a role that I thought I deserved. And I talked to companies that wanted me in a role I thought I deserved, but I wasn't that psyched about the product. And so I didn't really find any intersection of what I wanted to do, so I went to consulting. And I did that, and I hated it. I wasn't very good at it. I didn't like it. I spent about a year at a management consulting firm, a very good one. Liked the firm, just didn't like the job.
Raise your hand if that's happened to you.
Yeah. It's not a bad thing to do. Paid for my second year of business school. That was all good. And then I got a call from a former boss of mine from IBM who was in an educational software startup. And it sounded really interesting. I was pretty into education. I liked the idea of what they were doing. And so I went and joined them running sales and marketing. And loved it, and really loved what we were doing, and the company was growing nicely. But I realized a year or two into it that my stake in the company, to me at the time, felt small. In retrospect, it was a pretty good stake for the role I had. But it felt small. I sort of felt like I was driving all this business for the company, but the founders were going to get rich, and I wasn't a founder. And so that epiphany led me to say, boy, if I want to be a big fish, I better find a really small pond, as the cliche goes. And so I started looking for stuff to start. And I didn't really know what it was going to be. I actually spent a bunch of time at MIT with the technology licensing office, and I met a bunch of really interesting technologists who had cool ideas, but nothing kind of connected. And then ultimately bumped into the guys that became my co-founders at ProfitLogic, who had built a bunch of really interesting forecasting algorithms using what was then big data. It's about an order of magnitude less data than retailers are handling today. But they had really cracked the code on how to forecast demand for fashion inventory inside big retail operations. And I knew enough about retail that I had worked on retail accounts when I was at IBM for 6 years, that if that were true, there was a lot you could do with it. And so it was that kind of insight in the company and those two guys, one of whom I had known for a period of years, that led me to jump in and join them.
Got it. Any Any questions in the audience? Got it. And so I think oftentimes people, especially in e-commerce today, have a hard time starting a company because they say, look, I have this great idea, but I'm not a technical co-founder myself.
Yeah.
Was that an issue for you when you were thinking about getting involved with the guys at ProfitLogic?
Well, I've seen it as an entrepreneur, both having a technical founder and not, and I've seen it now as an investor a number of times. And I've seen it successful in both ways, but given the choice as a non-technical per se engineering background, but I didn't really write code that was any good, as a more or less business-oriented guy versus a technical guy, I for sure would be biased toward having a technical co-founder. So in my case, I did. I joined two guys who were nothing but technical. They had a kind of boutique consulting shop using their analytics and algorithms already in operation when I joined them. And their level of sales and marketing expertise was so low that my ability to add value just kind of waking up every day and walking in the door was very high, which is also an important thing in a team, right? You want complementary skills. And I've seen the other end of the spectrum. We were fortunate to be the seed backers of the Rent the Runway team, who graduated from Harvard Business School in 2009. And they started that company without a technical co-founder. They've been very fortunate that the business idea and their own entrepreneurial skills have allowed them to build a really good business. But it's had a lot of hiccups that I think we would have avoided if we had a strong technical team out of the gate.
Got it. Makes sense. Any questions about kind of that formation stage of a startup of any kind? Feel free to raise your hand. Don't be shy.
We'll come back to those things.
Yeah.
Jenny.
So how did Rent the Runway get started up without a technical co-founder? Did they outsource?
Yeah, did everyone hear that? She asked, how did Rent the Runway kind of do what they did without a technical co-founder? Well, they tried. They actually had a classmate that we tried to hire when we started, but he wanted too much of the company, and they weren't willing to give it to him. That's probably a mistake in retrospect, now that I think about it. They outsourced. That failed. Then outsourced to a second firm. We built something we were able to launch with, brought a small team in-house, and started building off that team, but made a bunch of mediocre hiring decisions along the way because no one on the team really, there was no founding CTO who sort of knew the caliber of people he wanted to hire. And so, we survived it, but survived it purely due to a great business idea and great top-line growth, and probably cost us more than it should have to catch up on that front. Mm-hmm. There's a question there?
So on that same point, in terms of having technical people and having more business-focused people, my impression is that in a startup very early on, the technical people add a lot more value because they actually build the product, and you don't really get the business value until you start actually having sales and having relationships with other companies. And so how do you kind of assign value to those different roles? Because in the beginning, if you're the coder, I'm doing all the work, I should get 90% of the company, and you're doing nothing. Whereas it switches around later on. So
that's a good question. Did you guys hear that question over there? Okay. It's a good question. I'm a little bit biased about it. It really depends on the type of business. So there are highly technical products where there's really not much to do until you've got a beta product. And often that beta product in today's world can be downloaded and trialed for low money, and so it doesn't take a lot of sales and marketing acumen to get the ball rolling. And so in that case, I agree, a technical team could get themselves out of the gate and to a point where they can hire in senior business leaders to help grow the business and not have to give away huge chunks of equity to get there. That said, there are lots and lots of interesting businesses out there, and back in the context of big data and retail, there are lots of businesses that are more application software oriented or application service oriented, where while there may be a lot of technology under the covers, it's really about the business offering and the positioning and the go-to-market plan that make all the difference, because the customer at the end of the day can't really tell the difference between great technology and okay technology in those situations. And I think that's where sales and marketing makes a huge difference. So it's kind of a non-answer. Sort of depends on the business. All that said, if I was starting a business again today, and if I were the technical guy and I had some A-plus fantastic person who wanted to join the team who was more business-oriented and I could get them now, I would just get them. And my philosophy has always been kind of ready, fire, aim when it comes to hiring great talent when you're growing a startup. If there's someone great, that everyone on the team loves and wants to join the team, and they're really expensive and we can't afford it yet, let's get them anyways. Because if things are going to work well, you're going to need those people. And if things don't work well, it doesn't matter. But the hardest part when things do work well is when you haven't hired all the A+ talent you need and then you're scrambling to get it. It's just hard. That's like the biggest governor on growth of every one of our companies that's doing well is super talented people. And it sounds like such a cliche. Like great companies need great people. But the amount of difference unbelievably good people make in every function in the company, in these little companies, it's shockingly substantial. I remember saying like the first probably 100 people we hired at ProfitLogic, I probably hired every one of those, interviewed every one of those myself. I remember saying to every one of them, and this sounded less and less, sounded more and more disingenuous as time went on, I would say, I don't know whether you're going to have like a huge positive impact or a huge negative impact on the company, but I know you're going to have an impact. Like there's just no question what you're going to do here is going to make a big difference in whether we succeed or fail. And that's really true. It starts becoming less and less true as you get to be 100, 200, 300 people. But those first 50, 60 people, like even every engineer, every salesperson, every biz dev person, every marketing person, they all make such a massive impact on the business. So,
can we go back to ProfitLogic and just spend a minute talking about what ProfitLogic did and also kind of thinking about the segue of both how technology's changed since then as well as how to go to market's changed in big data e-commerce?
Yes, and maybe we'll bounce the question back at you about some of the other companies that we're working on. So ProfitLogic was a software company. We're based here in Cambridge, Mass. We helped big retailers. At the time, they were mostly brick and mortar. They didn't have big multi-channel businesses at the time. Figure out when to take markdowns. Very simple. So if you walk into a JCPenney or a J. Crew or a Macy's or a Gap or an Ann Taylor or an Abercrombie & Fitch or a Bloomingdale's and you see a sign that says 50% off, our software is in the background calculating which items they should mark down by how much in which stores. It was essentially airline yield management applied to fashion retail. And the concept's pretty simple. Simple to understand because we're all consumers. We all buy stuff that's marked down. And the fundamental math is relatively simple at a high level. I've got a pile of stuff, inventory, that I as the retailer bought. I own it. And in the fashion world, it is seasonal in some way, shape, or form. So it is designed to appeal to people during a certain season. Take a simple example like bathing suits. I'm a big retailer in the Northeast, and I buy a bunch of bathing suits in April, and I hope to sell them in May and June and July. Well, if those bathing suits are still sitting around in September, I'm not going to sell them at full price, in all likelihood. And so I better think about when to take a discount along the way as demand drops so that I can maximize gross margin dollars. That's what the software did. And it was a beautiful thing. Both, the math worked well. It was relatively complex because the demand curve for fashion inventory isn't smooth like cans of Coke and Kleenex and boxes of Tide. It's got this weird sort of nonlinear curve to it, like any fad. It sort of starts out slowly, and then it takes off, and then it ramps down over time. So the math was sort of complicated. And the thing that shocks the demand curve is when you do a promotion or a price cut. You get this big spike in demand. You had to kind of figure that out and model that. And that differed by merchandise type and by location and by store type. But at the end of the day, it was all eminently modelable. And computers could do a great job solving these problems. And the problems got big. So inside of JCPenney, who was one of our biggest customers, there were, I'll get the math wrong now, but call it roughly 1,000 stores and 200,000 SKUs. 200,000 unique color, style, size items. And so that's a lot of combinations across 52 weeks in a year where you needed a unique price or unique markdown for each of those combinations. So that's what computers are good for. The beautiful thing about this business was we were doing it in an industry that at the time was fundamentally non-analytic, right? That, like any former retailers or current retailers in the room, someone's laughing over here, so you must be. Are you one? We're one? Are one? Big retailers, particularly in 10 years ago, it's changing a little bit with the growth in the online businesses in these companies that are attracting more analytical people by nature. But retailers are still very merchant driven. The people that are making the buying decisions on merchandise for next season are the big hitters in the organization. And they're not all non-analytical, but many are sort of more art than science in nature, and it's what makes them good buyers and what makes them good at spotting trends. But it makes them not good in making the kind of analytic judgments required to manage hundreds of millions of dollars of inventory spend precisely. And so that's where we were making a big difference.
Got it. Just to build off that, I think a lot of folks in the room probably haven't had deep experience kind of selling to enterprise and kind of getting in there. I think as a consumer and someone who understands e-commerce, everyone kind of has their hands around what's the technology change over time and kind of how these platforms have changed. But I guess let me frame it this way: there's trends in technology and there's ways to capture that and add value, but there's also how to convert that value into how to capture that value by selling to the enterprise. And so, what are a couple takeaways that you learned by having a kind of a great algorithm and trying to extract value from it, and what are some lessons from that?
Well, it's germane to this next generation of big data companies, at least in the retail world, and I think in the enterprise world in general. I always had this belief when we started ProfitLogic that, and this worked at odds with the scalability of the business, that the more we productize, the less we could charge. So my worry was the minute we put this on a CD-ROM and put it in a box, the most I could get for it was $10,000. And somehow McKinsey was going in and doing a bunch of analytics and work that wasn't as good as our stuff and wasn't sustainable, but they were getting $500,000 a month for a team. I'm like, wait a minute. So I want to get the $500,000 a month, but I want it to be automated. But the reality is the more it turns into software, the more there's a price point in people's minds about what they're willing to pay. So it's a hard balance. Yeah. And so the way we struck that balance was to try to figure out ways to make the solution custom in the mind of the customer, but commoditized or homogenized on the back end. So automated on the back end, easily reconfigurable customer by customer by customer, but on the front end, each customer would feel like they're getting their own unique thing. And that's sort of, when it comes to data and analytic-oriented businesses, it's kind of fundamentally a piece of the puzzle, right? You're leveraging their own data to try to solve hard problems, and hopefully in an automated way. But by virtue of the fact that you have to take their data to go do something, means that it is customer unique to them in some way.
Has that changed at all, where kind of measurability with big data now is just different than it used to be, where you can say, I'll measure the lift. Let's agree now that I'll get a % of lift. And has that conversation changed, where you can have an automated product, you can have an off-the-shelf software that you developed and still get a lot of value, capture a lot of value through that?
Well, so a couple pieces of that question. So I think in this world where retail is increasingly digital, still a smaller portion of most big retailers' businesses, but big businesses in and of themselves, the ability to A/B test stuff is way better than it used to be. So we used to try to value price. So we charged a lot. This is one of my other big lessons, charge a huge amount for what you do if it's an enterprise thing, because you're going to need it, because it takes a lot of capital to build these businesses. And the key to charging a huge amount, by the way, is you've got to have a huge demonstrable value proposition, obviously. And so if I were thinking about starting a business today or investing in a business today that solves some big hard problem for enterprises using big data, my fundamental question is, what's the size of the prize? How big a problem are you really solving? And not just how big a problem do you think you're solving, but what will someone pay for it? And in our case, in fact, so I'm at Bain Capital Ventures now. It turns out Bain Capital was my biggest investor. Bain Capital didn't invest until we signed our first big contract, which was with JCPenney. We were like an 8-person company, and JCPenney agreed to pay us $18 million. And the $18 million was the biggest number I could think of with a straight face and ask for. And the way I came up with it was because we had a bunch of smaller companies that were 100 times smaller than JCPenney, and they were paying us 100 times less than $18 million. And so I just kind of did the math, and it was $3.6 million a year for 5 years. It wasn't $18 million all at once, unfortunately, but it was still a big number. And it mattered. But the reason it worked is because at JCPenney, they were a $30 billion retailer at the time, ballpark. That means they had roughly $15 billion in gross margin dollars. So they sell stuff for $18 billion, and $15 billion of it is gross margin. And we were proving in our other accounts that were much, much smaller, that we were improving gross margin dollars through this markdown optimization stuff by 5 to 15% in every single case. So let's take 10%. If I can take, how much, $15 billion and improve it by 10%, I don't know, I think that's $1.5 billion last time I checked. It's a lot more than I was charging. It was a lot of money. And so that math it still was hard to get that much money out of the company, but the big value prop in combination with a very unique offering. So there wasn't an alternative they could turn to do what we did. It was either continue doing it their own way, manually, which they knew was ineffective, manually and emotionally, which they knew was ineffective, or try this on for size. And we had the credibility, and I think this actually also works in this next generation of big data companies. So our company early on was basically me and 8 PhDs. They were like all really smart, and they had PhD in all sorts of different areas, from operations research to physics to math to molecular biology to a bunch of different stuff. And I literally used to parade these guys in front of these retailers. And like, imagine these 8 PhDs in front of, you know, the head merchandise guy at Bloomingdale's, right? Like, they didn't know what to make, and like none of them really could speak a sentence in any coherent fashion, the guys on my team. And this was not a language issue, by the way. And so, but it created this mystique of brilliance that made people realize, boy, if, you know, like, we can't go anywhere else for this stuff. They've really cracked the code on something unique.
Is that your tagline, mystique of brilliance?
Yeah, it was part of it.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it was. No, but it was, turns out, all kidding aside, very, very important as we grew to figure out how to maintain that mystique and not have what we did feel commoditized. And it's a hard balance to strike, but it was important.
And being on the board of these next generation ProfitLogics, has that world changed a little bit, where these retailers now are accustomed to technology, and so there's less about that mystique, and it's more about just performance? Is that a lot better in some sense, because you don't have to do that and make the visits and spend the time? But it is also worse because now, if ProfitLogic didn't exist today, you could start it. It might be a web service, and someone else could try to do it and be just a more competitive world. It's
a fair question. We're investors in a really cool company, and I'll get your question in one sec. Sorry. In a really cool company on the West Coast called Bloomreach. Bloomreach does search optimization for big brands and retailers. And it's all performance-based. And they've grown. They're on track right now to be the fastest growing SaaS company ever, actually. They're doing phenomenally well. And they've been able to value price, sort of gain share price their offering through A/B testing and just agreement up front on how they'll share in the benefits in a much different way than we ever could back in the ProfitLogic days. I used to offer gain sharing all the time, mostly as a tactic just to disarm the negotiation around how much money I wanted to charge, because they would never say
anchor to a high price.
It was just because they would never say yes. Say, okay, pay me nothing up front, and we'll take 10% of the benefit.
Yeah.
And then they did the math like, what if this really is worth $1.5 billion? Then we have to pay them $150 million. Let's not do that. Let's just give them $10 million now. And like, the Gap literally wrote us a $10 million check. Came in the mail during a board meeting, best board meeting ever. All my investors sitting around the table. It wasn't like one of those really big ones. It wasn't like that. And we got an envelope from the Gap for $10 million in a board meeting. It was one of the best days ever. Better days when we sold the company to Oracle. That was good too. But now the buyers, both in traditional retail and certainly in the digital portion of these retailers, are so analytical in nature that I think they're used to thinking this way. They're used to A/B testing this way. It's good and bad.
Yeah.
The bad is we've seen a lot of companies, many of which we're investors in, that are doing nicely, but where the customers are willing to try anything, anytime, and see if it works, and then throw out one and put in another. So I have a good friend who runs Sephora.com, and she used to run Nordstrom.com and Urbanoutfitters.com, and she's a great, great, great general manager of big online businesses. And I bounce ideas off her all the time of companies we're thinking of investing in. She's like, sure, we'll try it. And it's good and bad, because like, she's got 5 vendors in-house who already do similar stuff, and she'll throw them out in a heartbeat if the new one moves the needle just a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So it's challenging from that standpoint. There's a question over here.
So you spoke about how your investors came in when you signed the contract with JCPenney for the $18 million over time. Can you walk us through from the founding to the first dollar of customer and how you financed it and what that experience was like and how you kept your team together?
Sure. So the company, what became ProfitLogic, was a 2-person boutique consulting shop before I walked in the door. So there were 2 guys who were basically charging $25,000 to $50,000 to big retailers to go solve hard problems that were data intensive. And like, my biggest innovation after walking in the door was just to add a 0 to everything they did. Literally. It's like they were dealing with a low-level guy charging $25,000 to go solve some problem that was worth millions of dollars to TJ Maxx, for example. And when it came time to renew the contract, I said, oh, guess what? It's $250,000, not $25,000. Like, what? It can't be $250,000. Okay, well, then we don't have that much resource, and so we'll just work on something else. They say, no, wait, it's okay. It can be $250,000. And so a little bit of it was just helping the team understand what the value was they were delivering and pitching that value to someone up here, not someone down here. That was a piece of the puzzle. That got us a year or so into the company, sort of funding it through projects. And every time we got a new project, we'd build a little more technology and hire a couple more people. But then we ran into a problem, which I don't recommend letting this happen. So I built this. This ties back to the whole idea of having great technical co-founders. I was convinced that almost anything that I could promise a retailer, we could go do. I was and these guys never let me down. So I sort of spent all my time waving my hands in the air, talking to retailers, trying to get in as high a level as I could, figuring out what their biggest problems were, and then trying to convince them we could solve them. And this is, by the way, before we discovered markdown optimization as our killer app. We were doing lots of stuff at the time. There was anything forecasting related we would do inside a retailer. And I got this, I forget how, I somehow got introduced to a guy at Best Buy who ran supply chain. And he was a big hitter at Best Buy at the time. Best Buy, I know, is not such a success story today, but in 98, 99, they were killing it. And it was all about supply chain. And they were doing great. And he wanted to hire us to solve this really hard problem. So Best Buy at the time sold an immense amount of CDs and videos in the front of the store. I think they still do. And they wanted to be able to forecast demand for CDs and videos because they could reorder the ones that were doing really well if they could tell out of the gate whether ones were going to take off or not. And so they sent us a whole bunch of data, and we agreed to do this project to forecast demand for new releases of CDs and videos, which I said, of course we can do that. And I think we charged $600,000, which was the most that was probably 10x what we had ever gotten before for a project. And we had 10 weeks to do it. And so week one, so we signed the project agreement. They sent us a terabyte of data. So this was 100 times more data than we had ever seen. Now, it's not a lot of data in today's world. At the time, a terabyte was a lot of data, and way more than we had ever seen before. And it was in Oracle, which we didn't have. We didn't even have an Oracle DBA. So we had no idea what to do with the data. So for 9 weeks of the 10-week project, we were trying to load the data. Literally, load the data. And every week we'd have to have a project update call with the client. Like, how's it going? Like, oh, we're killing it. It's going great. Yeah, and well, any insights yet? Not really, not a lot, but we're getting closer. It's like we're trying to do this dance, and we're working all night long, all of us, trying to load the data and get this stuff in a form we could do our work. And then literally 6 nights of all-nighters the last week, and we delivered what we had to deliver. And it was it almost killed the company. It almost killed everyone in the company. And at that point, I said, we cannot do this on a shoestring anymore. We have to raise some money. Because at least in the retail world, and I think this is true in any vertical market, they're all a small world. And the thing I learned about retail is if you knock it out of the park for a client, everyone finds out about it. But if you screw one up, especially with a big player like a Best Buy, there's not enough venture money in the world to dig you out of that hole. And so that was the point where we said, let's raise some real capital to grow the business.
A couple questions back here.
Can you talk about what it was like to sell when you were in IBM versus in a startup, how that was different, how your role changed, any insights?
Yeah, I actually, obviously it's a lot different, right? When I worked at IBM, they had 450,000 people, down to 250 by the time I left, by the way. In fact, when I went to work at IBM right out of college, I started buying stock in the employee stock purchase program, and it was about $150 a share, and you get to buy it at a discount if you're an employee out of your paycheck. And when I left, it was down to $40 a share, 6 years. And then right after I left, it started going up again. And so no one knew this, but you could have traded an IBM stock based on my tenure there incredibly successfully. I didn't realize I could have that big an impact on such a big company, but I did. So the thing I learned about selling at IBM, you'd think big company, lots of resources, all of which is true. But I learned this lesson about reliability, I guess is the best word. So the thing we did better than anyone at IBM, I think, than other technology vendors was we had plenty of products that didn't work well. But once we sold them and something broke, we would swarm the account with resources to solve their problems, to the point where they couldn't believe how great we were. And we could do that because we were IBM and we had a lot of resources, and if it was a big enough account, you'd ring the the bell loud enough, people would jump on board. And you also learn this skill as an account manager about getting resources around you to help solve problems. And I very much took that philosophy into how we sold at ProfitLogic and how I think about in my portfolio today, kind of coaching teams around account management and sales. Like, there is never a chance in a big B2B type sales situation or implementation that you're not going to screw something up. It never won't happen. There's always stuff that goes wrong. And clients know that, right? Like, no one's perfect. But a lot of organizations, particularly big ones, treat their customers in such a cavalier fashion, they don't really recover very well when those things happen. So it's so easy for a startup to like over-deliver on those problems and endear themselves to the client. And I think that's why it's great to start companies in spaces where kind of legacy big companies play, because they don't have as smart people. They have plenty of smart people, but not like on average, their median smarts is going to be so much lower than yours in a startup. And their ability to like swarm that early account and make them feel loved and solve every one of their problems when something goes wrong is just inadequate relative to what you can do in a startup. So IBM was good at it in my era, but I think that's unusual for big companies and a real benefit that small companies have.
There's another question back here.
So during the boutique consulting time, it's arguably more difficult to scale on services versus a product business. So how did you find when it came time to raise money? Did you find that difficult? And when was the point when you found the killer app which enabled you to automate and reach the scale that ultimately led to great success?
Yeah, there were plenty of skeptics in the investor community, and correctly so. And we were more services intensive than product intensive early on when we were raising our first round. And as we raised subsequent rounds, we got more and more productized, so I think the story got easier. But there was always there was two things going for us. One was we kind of had our eye on finding that killer app that we could productize, or had begun to. And there was a belief that over time, more and more of what we did that was services intensive could be automated. And that all was true. I mean, when we sold the company to Oracle, a lot of what used to take 5 or 10 people during an implementation took half a person because we automated the work, more the back end work. The front end stuff for the customer was always pretty automated. The back end, how we did all of the analytical work to go figure out what the right parameters were inside the software for the customer was very labor intensive early on. And we automated all that over time. But there was a hurdle with investors for sure on that front. And I didn't actually really get it when we started the company. Like my sense was, if we solve a really hard problem and we charge boatloads of money for it because it's so valuable, like who cares how we do it? And in fact, I rejected for a very long time ever calling ourselves a software company. Like to me, it was completely irrelevant. It was a little bit blinders on my part in retrospect, but like, I didn't want to be a software company. I wanted to be a company that delivered this massive amount of value for retailers, no matter how we did it. And if there was a better way to do it someday than software, we should do that. And so that was my philosophy. But there's this reality of building a business and scaling it. And it turns out engineers don't want to work for a company that doesn't want to be a software company. And so we had to kind of swing the pendulum further toward really being an enterprise software company to hire and retain the kind of people we needed.
There's another one back here. Nate?
Specifically within the retail organization, who is kind of the buyer, the actual customer of the big data analytics, be it software or whatever it is, and how's that going to change?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the question was, who's the buyer of big data analytics stuff inside retail? It's evolving. We have an investment in a company in Cambridge now called CQuotient that is kind of almost a next generation ProfitLogic. They're taking all sorts of disparate data sources from social data to transaction data, to the CRM data, and using it all to understand signals about customers that can help the retailers promote to those customers more effectively. So when you get an email from J. Crew, it should have a tagline and items in it that are specific to what you bought before and what you're likely to buy next. That's kind of the philosophy behind it. And so who buys that today? Well, it depends on the problem they're solving. The problem these guys are solving is better marketing, essentially. So that could be the CMO. On the other hand, that marketing is all delivered digitally. So maybe it's the head of digital or online. On the other hand, There's a guy in the IT department who's been given an RFP, given a budget for an RFP to go put in a big data warehouse and a bunch of analytic tools. So like maybe he's the guy to go to because he has money. So it's confusing. The good news is in this, anyone in the room who's sort of interested in big data stuff, there's such a groundswell of interest across enterprises in leveraging the data they're sitting on. Like they all get it today. They all realize they have all this data and they're not doing anything with it. And so I think at least there's motivation to buy. But it's still very tricky to figure out the right path to navigate. And I believe in any of these small businesses, no different than mine in the past, it is this horrible hunt for a visionary early adopter early on. And like you don't know if that person's going to happen to be in the IT department or in merchandising or in marketing or in store operations. Like who knows? And so you just got to be out there telling your story and meeting a lot of people and hoping you stumble into, as serendipitous as that sounds, like literally stumble into someone who kind of buys into the vision. Because it's very hard for an early company to kind of get traction without that.
Yeah, back here?
Yeah, hi. So you talked about big data analytics sort of using a consulting business model. I can also imagine like an analytics toolbox being plugged into a corporation's other systems. Are both these models viable, one versus the other? You start with one, you move to the other? Just trying to get more sense.
Yeah, good question. So consulting model versus toolbox. So, I mean, I'm biased on the topic. I don't think there's a right answer to it because someone could build the next great set of BI tools that live in the cloud and can handle more data than historic BI tools. And maybe that sounds like a great horizontal business idea. We've looked at a bunch and haven't seen any that have, cracked the code yet, but someone will do it. I'm way more biased toward solving a specific problem. And if you're solving a specific problem, you're less likely to be a tool that plugs in and more likely to kind of be a full application that kind of goes from start to finish and takes their data, does whatever transformation it has to do to it, and spits out an answer. I think that's an easier way to get started. It may be a less big idea at the end of the day. So the trade-off for any of you as entrepreneurs is if you want to go be the next MicroStrategy or Omniture, that's pretty cool because that could be worth billions of dollars someday. I think the odds of that happening are much lower than saying, like CQuotient, I'm going to leverage big data and be the next generation best tool ever for optimizing marketing. Something a little bit more narrow, or optimizing marketing for retailers in particular. And that won't be a multi-billion-dollar outcome, but if you're the founder, you still may make a couple $100 million. So that's not such a bad idea.
That's still like one-off project-based?
No. So then there's the question of consulting versus not. So take ProfitLogic versus CQuotient just as two good examples since we were roughly in the same space. The first, and just to help characterize how the world's evolved in 10 years, the first customer we got when I joined the guys it was called TSI at the time, what became ProfitLogic, was Hills Department Stores, now out of business. They were killed by Target. We didn't put them out of business, but they went out of business. And Hills sent us to do some forecasting thing, like these literally crates of 3480 cartridge tapes. These were IBM format cartridge tapes that went into a big tape drive. And we had to rent mainframe time over the weekend to process the tapes.
You're really dating yourself here.
No, I'm serious. No, seriously. This was like 1999. We had to rent mainframe time to process the tapes so we could go do our work. And it cost us $50,000 in mainframe time. And the project was a $25,000 project. So I thought, okay, this is not a really good business. But literally, that's what it took. So it was inefficient and labor intensive. And I swear I'm going to answer your question, but this is getting at it. So now roll the clock forward 12, 13 years to CQuotient. Their first pilot project, similar stage of company, a couple guys with a couple good ideas, was with Macy's. Macy's sent them a gazillion bytes of data. I don't even know what the thing is now, like how big. Exabyte-ish. And it was, what's 1,000 terabytes? Is that an exabyte? Yeah, like petabyte of data, massive amount of data. They use Amazon Web Services over the weekend, like over an hour, to go do what they had to do to process the data. They got a bill for their use of the cloud services from Amazon for $7.52. They have it in their office. So what cost me $50,000 as a startup and took a whole weekend cost them and they had 2 orders of magnitude more data and cost them $7.52 and took an hour. And so that's how so your ability to do stuff in an automated way has obviously changed dramatically. the capital required to build businesses that are big data related has changed dramatically. So all in favor of the entrepreneur going and starting something. And last but not least, so CQuotient today positions itself as solving problems on a relatively custom basis for the client. On the back end, it is 100% lights out. They don't even do the configuration stuff I used to do. They get data in, it goes up to the cloud, all this stuff happens, and it goes back out. But they still position on the front end as being relatively high touch because they can differentiate that way.
Interesting point on that is, all good things about cost coming down and, rental, CPU hours through Amazon. Is there a negative to that, which is now as an entrepreneur you can start something, but the competitive intensity is so high too? And so maybe talk a little bit about, as an entrepreneur, how you felt about, hey, I'm getting halfway through the cycle on ProfitLogic. What if someone else tries to do this and undercut me on price? And how do you think about that when you invest in a big data opportunity like CQuotient of all it takes is another 3 really smart guys and Amazon Web Services, which is available to everybody, and takes someone's data in? How do you invest behind that, and what are the worries?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer. I'm sure this is going to sound obvious, but having real intellectual property or real defensibility built into the business model is so important in any market. So I hated competition when I was at ProfitLogic. We had one competitor who surfaced early in the life. All the big vendors say they do this stuff now, but we had one competitor during the life of ProfitLogic who kind of surfaced and drove us crazy, and they weren't good. But our fear was that they would put downward pressure on price because they were willing to drop their pants and give away stuff on the cheap. And our other fear was that one of the big vendors that didn't have our module would buy them and give it away for free. And then our whole market would go away. And so we fought tooth and nail, and every account we found out they were in, we did all sorts of unusual acts to try to make sure they did not get a toehold. And we ultimately essentially put them out of business. We bought them. And literally shut down the whole thing except for one person. And when they finally couldn't raise money and we were able to get our hands on them. And because monopolies are just way better if you can have one. You can charge more. It's like competing is no fun. Yeah, competing is no fun, right? And selling to the enterprise is hard enough. If there's 5 other vendors responding to an RFP, put a bullet in my head now. Do not go do that. That is the hardest thing in the world. You've got to have enough of a differential advantage that you really, at least in your own little sandbox, do not have competition.
So don't try to go see, hey, there's a problem, some people are solving it, I can solve it a little bit better. That's not a...
Little bit better is totally uninteresting. As an investor, as an entrepreneur, I find that totally uninteresting. Now, you may be only solving a slice of a bigger problem in a unique way. Fine, do that. But make sure it's different and better. And I'll give you another example, a little more in the consumer world, where we spend a lot of time these days investing in e-commerce-oriented companies. Take Rent the Runway on one end of the spectrum versus, Birchbox. So Birchbox is a subscription-oriented beauty product discovery service. Also, great team from HBS, cool service. So started a year after Rent the Runway started. What's the difference between the two? Well, why is Rent the Runway scaled and will do $20 million plus in revenue this year and Birchbox isn't scaling as quickly? And why is it that Birchbox had 50 competitors around the world within 6 months of launch, and we're over 3 years into the life of Rent the Runway and we don't have a competitor yet? It's this funny thing in business school we should all remember called barriers to entry. So we knew 2 things about Rent the Runway. We thought 2 things. I shouldn't say we know, because mostly the stuff we think when we invest doesn't come true. 2 things we thought were true actually did come true at Rent the Runway that we had hoped for. One was that getting the relationships with vendors that they have, so walking into Hervé Leger or Stella McCartney or Alexander McQueen and saying, I want to buy your dresses at wholesale, the same way you sell them to Barney's and Bergdorf and Neiman's, and then I'm going to put them on my site and rent them for 10% of the retail price. There's no way in hell any of us, no matter how big a pile of money we raise, could walk into those designers and make that pitch and have them sell us their dresses at wholesale. But this team had already proven that they could do some of that successfully, and our hope was that they could continue to do that and get a lot more designers. We knew for a fact, or we hoped, that if they did it, it'd be very hard for the next player to replicate those relationships. We also knew the operating infrastructure for this business would be incredibly complex and expensive to scale. Because it's the world's worst e-commerce site, right? It's 100% returns. Nate in the back of the room spent many months of his life trying to help them figure this out when he worked with us. But everything I sent out the door, not only does it get returned, It's got to be repaired, dry cleaned, put back in inventory, and then go out the door the next day. And we're like, okay, that's hard, and that sounds expensive, and it turns out both were true. But it's also not like the next startup is going to go raise the $50 million or so that we've raised so far to go build that infrastructure. And if you saw the warehouse they have in New Jersey, it'd blow your mind. We have, I think, 80,000 dresses flying around the country at any given time right now. So take that versus Birchbox. Very easy for any big brand like Sephora or startup to figure out a box of the month club and get samples and go send it out. And the relationship with the vendors are not proprietary. The customer acquisition isn't necessarily unique in any way. And the implication is it just gets harder to build a profitable business quickly. So whether it's enterprise or consumer, I think this simple idea of I better be starting with some unique IP or some built-in defensibility that gives me an unfair advantage. Because there's no fun doing a startup without an unfair advantage. It's hard enough with an unfair advantage.
And what's the analog with big data? I mean, when you were working on ProfitLogic and working with Tellapart and CQuotient, as these data businesses get to scale, do you see a natural moat that they have where they've just seen so much data that it's harder for a startup to compete? Is that true?
I think that's the really cool thing about big data businesses is that, and I think this is hard to sell, but actually true under the covers. The codes that are cracked take a number of data sets before you can crack them. So in ProfitLogic's case, it probably took 20 consulting projects, 15 of which predated my joining the team, who had been together for a decade doing consulting. But 20 consulting projects with big retailers' data before they cracked the codes that ultimately led to our big product. So can the next guy go do that and do it faster than we did it? Sure. But can they do it in a year? How do you walk into 20 retailers and say, give me all your data because I want to go play with it? Right? It doesn't happen. It takes time, and they have to trust you. And so the same is true of this generation. Tellapart, one of our investments, Bloomreach, CQuotient, HookLogic, any of these guys, the stuff they're learning by having done this over and over and over again gives them a huge advantage over the next guy. The other thing you learn, I think, is really important in domain-specific businesses. So we had a bunch of big potential competitors when I was at ProfitLogic. Manugistics, i2, SAP, Oracle, companies like that sold ERP systems and wanted to do the unique stuff we did for retailers. And they would all tell us they were going to kill us and put us out of business if we didn't sell our souls to them right away. And of course, we didn't want to sell because we thought we were doing really well. And what we found is, even though they had a big presence and a big footprint inside these big enterprises, they didn't talk the talk in a domain-specific way that gave them credibility. They had sort of normal sales guys that sold ERP and dealt with the IT department. We had people that knew how to talk to merchants and understood the unique nature of fashion merchandise and sort of lived the domain. And that makes a huge difference too. So part of it's the learning curve of the technology. Part of it's the learning curve and experience curve of the kind of people and the people you attract. And I think another nice part about being vertically specific in any of these big data kind of domains is that you develop that domain expertise faster than the big horizontal guys.
Mm-hmm. Any questions on that? I know we covered a lot.
I just kind of want to backtrack to something you said earlier. So I used to be a buyer for Macy's, and I agree with you that.
When were you there? What years?
2004 through 2007. And I agree with you that the senior execs are always, highly motivated to adopt new technologies. But one of the hardest sales were actually getting the people who use it daily to adopt these new technologies.
Yep.
So for myself, like buyers and all the other planners, what kind of energy did you put in to kind of get these guys to adopt and really kind of be the champions of your?
So this is such an important question. The question, if you guys didn't hear it over there, was what kind of energy did we put into getting the users to adopt the technology, even if it was adopted by the enterprise? So an immense amount, because if the users don't use it, you don't get the benefit. And if you don't get the benefit, they don't pay you the next year. They turned it off. And so how do we do that? We did it two ways. One way was we spent a lot of energy, much to my chagrin early on. Like I thought, when we started ProfitLogic, I thought, send us your data, we'll send you the answer, you go plug it into your pricing systems and we're done. Like, it's that simple. My answer is better than your answer. My answer is going to make you more money. How can you not do that? Turns out, real people don't really want to behave that way. They want to apply their own judgment. They want to approve the answer. And so it requires a bunch of integration and workflow and ultimately a tool for the end users that not only gave them a better answer, but made their life better. So one of the biggest things we did at ProfitLogic was put a tool in front of the merchants and planners that allowed them to do all the work they normally had to do for their Monday morning markdown meeting in like 2 seconds, instead of spending all night on Sunday night highlighting these big Greenbrier reports. And so the making their life better and helping them get out the door at 5 o'clock was equally as important to giving the right answer. So part of it was technology-based. Here was the other part, and I found this was a very important lesson I learned from my VP of sales after 2 or 3 failed attempts at a VP of sales, a guy we hired from I2 who was fantastic, whose basic lesson was the more you charge, the more successful the project will be. And this was 100% true. I believe it to this day. So we had probably 10 pilot customers during the early life of ProfitLogic. How many of those, and my pilots were anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000. These weren't cheapo pilots, but they were limited in scope, small part of the merchandise mix. Let's try it for a few months and see if it works. And in every case, I could show you a presentation after the pilot that we delivered to the company that showed empirically how much money we made them, how much better we did than they did by themselves, all that kind of good stuff. How many of those pilots converted into enterprise licenses? Any guesses?
2.
2? How many people think 2? How many people think 4?
All of them.
How many think all of them? One guy thinks all of them. Well, I was setting myself up for this answer. 0. None converted. We kept getting more pilots. None converted. Then we were about to do a pilot with Bloomingdale's, your sister company at Macy's, and my VP of sales said, no, we're not doing pilots anymore. I'm like, we haven't sold an account in like a year, and my investors were about to fire me. I'm like, come on, let's just do the pilot. He's like, we're not doing this anymore. And we instituted a much longer discovery process and value assessment process, which is sort of like a fake pilot using historical data, and a much longer sales cycle to get to a real deal. And the real deal in that case was probably $4 or $5 million. And it was unbelievably successful. And so we did the same thing in Nordstrom and the same thing in Ann Taylor. And it turns out, so why does that work? Why, if you charge more, is it more successful? Any guesses? Buy-in. So there's a lot of people that can say yes to $100,000. And they don't necessarily have the juice inside the organization to say yes to $1 million. There are very few people that can say yes to a couple $1 million, especially, or a couple $1 million a year. And when they do, they definitely don't want to be wrong. And so I'm not sure any of our implementations post this new model were better, like kind of more effective, better fit, better technology, anything else than the others. But in every case, after we started holding out for these big enterprise licenses, the organization ensured that every user adopted the system. We had 100% adoption because they just spent so much money on this thing. You're like, you better use it. And it became this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Bringing it back to the role that a lot of you guys are in the room, thinking about starting a business, thinking about raising money. What are some of the key value inflection points when you look at a company, or you'd like to see? What are the things that they proved out early on when they're selling data to the enterprise that you'd say, wow, that's really a great sign?
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind with investors, you guys probably know this, is we're generally like experts in nothing. And so it's true. And so you're going to know way more about your business and your customers and the technology than any investor is. And that maybe gives you an advantage, but the problem is it's hard to prove that your mousetrap's better. And so the main thing we as investors can do to figure out if you have a better mousetrap is talk to customers. That's like the only vehicle we really have. And if customers are using your stuff, and the best validation is they're willing to write a big check. That is better than any other. And in fact, I'm even skeptical of companies that have lots of pilots that are unpaid. It just doesn't really tell you much. I'd rather see 1 or 2 pilots that are paid for with a legitimate price than 20 pilots that are unpaid. I think that's the only way to really validate that there's something real there.
Any questions on that?
Any disagreement?
And so one question. So we talked a little bit about getting started without fundraising. We talked a little about when you decide you need fundraising. Can you talk a little about when you thought was the right time to sell this? Things are going well. You have all these sales. And when did you say, okay, now's the time to sell? Now's the time to, and maybe try to make it broad for everybody to say, in different businesses it might be sell when someone pays me $10 million, I own 100% of the company.
For sure.
So how do you think about that as an entrepreneur, kind of what you're going after?
Yeah, I think every day you're like making a buy versus sell decision, essentially. You don't always have the luxury of a buyer, but you know when you're building a business, you always know whether there's more value to be accreted going forward versus selling today. And sometimes you just don't have a choice, so you just keep going forward because you got to get to a certain scale before you're interesting to anybody. In my case, it was getting hard. We were in a pretty narrow market. There are only a couple hundred retailers in the US and another 100 or so in Europe and Asia that would pay the price points that we charged and kind of had the problems that we could really solve. And that just fundamentally isn't that big a market. And we expanded our footprint so that we could sell more stuff. But we had a good sense of how likely it was that we were going to sell a lot of the rest of that footprint. Mm-hmm. So, at 10 million, we knew we could get to 20, and at 20, we knew we could get to 35, and at 35, we felt like we could get to 50. But in that sort of 35 to 50, it just felt like pushing a rock up a hill was getting harder and harder and harder. And so I think if you don't believe you can grow a business, a venture-backed business, 40, 50, 60, 100% a year, you start losing value. Yeah. And if you see that wall coming, that's a good time to start, because you want to sell when you're still growing fast, for sure, and when there's still something left for the buyer to do well with whatever he buys. And we just sort of saw that wall coming, luckily, and then you got to get lucky, right? So luckily, there were a couple big players in the industry, SAP and Oracle, that decided they cared a lot about retail, and they decided they cared a lot about the little piece of retail that we did. And so that
goes back to your lesson of making sure you're doing something special that not 10 other people are doing, because you have that leverage at the exit.
And the fact that, by the way, we sold something to the C-level people inside these organizations where the SAP and Oracle guys never even had a conversation with those people. And so we were sort of this entree into a different level of the executive suite than they thought they could get on their own, and they were willing to pay a premium for that.
Anyone? What's your question? Sorry.
You spoke about that you start up as a consulting business initially, and Oracle, who bought you, also started up as a consulting business. But most venture capitalists that I speak to say, don't do consulting because it's low margins. You might not make anything from it, and you're distracting yourself from the ultimate scalable business.
I don't agree.
Okay, so do you believe you should start as a consulting business, get some money through, and then through that build something that's scalable?
Well, here's what I think. I think that, and again, one guy's opinion. I've been a venture guy for all of 5 years, so I know about this much about investing. But, I think proving you can solve a problem that's worth a lot of money is really important. I think automating something and building a lot of technology before you prove that is irrational. Why go raise money and build some product if you don't know for sure that people are going to pay a lot of money for it? It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, some stuff, if you're building some network performance monitoring software, my guess is you can't do that manually, right? So you got to build some technology. But in most application-oriented environments, you can kind of wing it. You can build a little software on the front end, and you can do a lot of monkey business on the back end, and it's no one really knows the difference. It doesn't scale, but you can pull it off and validate whether there's value. Take Rent the Runway. Rent the Runway ran trunk shows before we funded them. They had 100 dresses, and they ran trunk shows at Harvard and Yale sororities, and they figured out how much people would pay and whether the dresses would get ruined. It was like a brick-and-mortar version of their current business to prove whether there was value to themselves before they went and decided to bet their careers on this business. You can do the same thing in an application software business, for sure. And so call it consulting, call it what you want. I would far rather see a company that had been scrappy about proving there's value and proving they could convince clients to love them, customers to love them, and then we can do the math to figure out whether it's automatable or not. I think that's the easier part.
And would you, if you have, let's say, 3 people come together essentially as partners in a consulting business, you might allocate equity and profits differently than you would in a scalable software business. Can you speak to also how you transition from a consulting business to prove the model to a scalable software business and how the equity and profits?
Well, it probably helps to have that in mind at the beginning. You might not necessarily, so it's hard. I also think the psychology of a pure consulting business is different than a software business. So it's if you're in it, just sort of more of a lifestyle business and share the profits at the end of the year versus plow it all back into growing the business, I think that's philosophically harder to switch. Not impossible, just harder. But I think if I were going to do it again today and coming together with a couple people to go prove it in a consulting way, I would set it up more like a venture-backed structure. Yeah, I wouldn't set it up necessarily as sort of 3 guys sharing all the profits out of the gate.
Although the objection that I might say is that then what they see at the beginning is the consulting business, and they don't actually see the software side of it. So how do you make it feel fair to them that because it might just stay a consulting business?
Well, we can take it more offline, but I think there's ways to do it,
Okay.
right? Because even if there's just 3 principles and that's all it ever becomes, at the end of the day, if there's profit, those 3 guys share it. I just wouldn't necessarily give it all away every year out of the gate. But.
Right here?
So basically your experience of looking at hundreds of big data businesses and investing in a bunch of them, what are the qualities that you feel or the skill set of the co-founder, the business side co-founders of these big data businesses are? Are these the kind of businesses at this point where the data has increased, the competition has increased, that people who have no background in big data actually can jump in and start? Or do you think it has reached a level where you need to have some experience? And what are these experience and how do you build them?
I think the best teams I've seen have this mix of someone who's more of a domain person, who really understands the problem to be solved in the domain, doesn't necessarily have the analytic capability personally to go crack the code, but kind of has a real understanding and sensitivity to the players in the domain and what's not being solved today and how valuable it could be, and ideally also relationships in the industry, doors that can be open, and a co-founder who is kind of off the charts brilliant in the code cracking side of it. I think the best teams have a little bit of both. I would worry about a team that only had one or the other. And in fact, with CQuotient, just as an example, the founder and CEO was my chief scientist at ProfitLogic. And I convinced him not to start the company on his own. And he actually hired to join him as a co-founder a guy who was like our biz dev and product guy at ProfitLogic, who was way more of a business guy, because I thought it was a way better balance of skills. There's one over here, too. I keep ignoring these guys. Sorry.
Hi there. I think the question brings you back to the present, how retailers continue using big data. And now more and more that they continue capturing information about ourselves as we transact with them online. What's your take on how companies are pushing that along as far as gathering emails, PII, and all these different data points to try to build a better model about yourself? And try to either sell you better or
stalk you.
Exactly, or stalk you, right? Yeah. I guess the question comes.
So are you asking whether I think it's a good thing or?
Are retailers moving into a walking bomb, or is it actually a way to balance that? It's like, yeah, we're going to try to get as much data about you, all right, without pushing that down.
Yeah. So the question I think is about the level of granularity of personal information that retailers capture, and what do I think about what they're doing with all that stuff. Well, let me give you a really interesting, and maybe we'll break at 7:30, and then people don't have to feel badly about getting up and leaving. But we'll stay till 8. So a bunch of people didn't feel that badly already. So happens all the time. So we are contemplating an investment in this really cool company, and this will freak you out a little bit, on the West Coast called Euclid Analytics, that is using the MAC ID, which is the unique ID in every one of our phones, to track shopper movement in and around stores. And so it does not connect to PII, which is personal information. So I don't know that it's Brett. But I do know that it is unique ID 123 that visited Banana Republic today and Gap tomorrow and Starbucks the next day. And I also know, by the way, that when I put this window display in the store, that Brett actually walked in and he bought something. And if I put a different window display in the store, he just walked by and didn't go in. So I know bounce rate, I know conversion, dwell time. It's like Google Analytics for the physical store. How cool is that? And so imagine the merchandising things you can do, once you aggregate that data across lots and lots of stores and lots of population, what you can do with it. So you now know empirically, in theory, that someone that goes to Starbucks every morning and shops at J. Crew also once a month goes to, I don't know, Neiman's, goes somewhere, that you might not know those dots are connected prior to this. So that's a whole nother realm of leveraging big data and getting sort of personal. I think the pitch around it that startups make, and we backed a few, is that at the end of the day, it's better for all of us as consumers because we should get fewer messages that are irrelevant, that piss us off and just create noise, and only messages that are truly relevant. I could make that pitch if I was the entrepreneur. My opinion is like the really good retailers are going to figure out how to do it in a way that doesn't annoy us, and others aren't, and we're going to reject the ones that don't do it well. And if someone crosses that line, you're not going to shop there. So I think that's the ultimate governor on how personal it gets. I'd love to see someone, by the way, just one thing. Someone's got to build some cool technology that filters in the other direction, right? Like that somehow big data for each of us as individuals that absorbs all this information and figures out what to opt out of, what to accept, what to show me, right? We're all overwhelmed with emails and tweets and Facebook posts and everything, and so someone's got to filter it. I wish someone would solve that problem.
Maybe now's a good time to break, and then there's probably a couple other questions in the audience, but we can mix, and feel free to come up to us and ask us. But thanks a lot for you guys.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for all your questions.
Thanks.